Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here, and I have it disassembled for the moment, so bear with me. But the basic gist is this is a RyanSword. It's a $350 variety of sword. It's something similar to what you would get on their website, though I didn't specify any custom components for it. They did know that I have a propensity to like Mitsudome style themes, so they gave me something with swirly Mitsudomes on it. I will put measurements, dynamics, something, at least as close to it as I can find on their website. From my understanding, it's around the $350 price point. It was sent to me for free, so if you think that makes me biased, right at the get-go. Also, do keep in mind that while I am trying to learn Japanese swordsmanship, I'm not particularly good at it. I'm no master or authority on the subject. Just take what I say with that context in mind. Anyway, I'm going to tell you about the sword in this video. I will do a second video where I abuse it and push it to failure, but that's not going to be right now. Right now, I'm going to go over kind of build quality, what I see, the problems kind of that I noticed right out of the gate, the things I liked right out of the gate, how I think it compares to things, along with some very, very minimal usage. I'll let you know I got this a couple days ago. I've swung it around a little bit in terms of practicing, but it's cold, I don't have a lot of time, and I haven't cut much with it. So there's some general use in it, though my experience with it at this point, keep in mind, is very, very minimal. In a second video, which will come some months later, I'll use it more, and between now and then, presumably, I will have practiced with it more and have a better feel for if I like it from that standpoint. But in this video, that's what I'm going to cover. Hopefully it's helpful. With that in mind, I'm going to talk more about the sword. The basic gist is that this isn't emulating a particular kind of sword or blade from history. It's not one that I had any say in the measurements or specifications for, other than I happen to like a Mitsudome theme and I wanted something on the nicer side. So this is, as I understand it, around $350 without shipping. It's got a lot of features in it, and I'll show you what they are, but just know there's not necessarily any historical example for me to compare it to or anything like that. So I will do some comparisons on how I think it holds up to other swords of similar price points in the market, but I don't have them here. I'll do that later too. For now, I'm going to start with the kasha right here and talk about kind of the fittings and my thoughts on how all this is put together and general build quality. So starting with the fittings, first of all, you can notice that it has a swirly Mitsudome on it. I've probably said that about 11 billion times now, and you will hear it many more times. And I know it's not the proper way to say it, but it's how I say it, and that's just how it's got to be. I like the fitting set, but it kind of has, there's an elephant in the room, and that is that it matches perfectly to this Hanwei set, and it looks like just a recast version of this Hanwei Mitsudome themed thing from either the Wind and Thunder or Tsunami. Katana, I actually happen to have a set of them here for you to compare to. And it does raise some questions for me. Now, as a consumer, I will say I really like the sword fittings. I like these Mitsudome fittings. They seem better than many of the other kind of cast Mitsudome fittings that are out there. But it does make me wonder if Hanwei gave them kind of the okay to recast their stuff, given that I think they're competitors. But I don't know. It's all subjective. I'm going to assume it's okay, but that is an assumption on my part. These do look like Hanwei pieces. Maybe Hanwei recast old originals, or maybe they're from a museum and there's no intellectual property to be concerned about. But seeing as how I've seen them on another competing kind of sword, it does give me some pause. I will say I like them though. Now, how are they fit on? Well, it's a little bunchy towards the base here, and that it's a little bit on the thick side. There's no sharp ledges or anything like that give me concern, but there is a little bit of bunching towards the base here. The kasha isn't loose. I haven't swung it around a lot, so we don't know if it'll come off, but it generally doesn't feel like it's on there in a bad way. So that brings me to the Ito area here. Now, this is not particularly tight, and oddly, the less expensive sword felt like it was tighter than this one is. But it's not loose either, and it doesn't give me any great amounts of concern that it's going to come loose and fly off or be something that doesn't hold up, at least for some sustained use in the Ido over a reasonable period of time, because eventually, depending on how much you use it, they all tend to come loose, or at least degrade to a point where you need to replace them. The material doesn't feel particularly great. It feels kind of like cheap synthetic silk, but again, $350. I'm not expecting magic here. The tightness, I think, could be better, and I think it was actually better on the less expensive sword. So that gives me some sense that there's a little bit of variation in the process. Shape-wise, I actually really like the shape of the sky. I think it has a nice shape, and you notice it more when it's on the katana in a finish line where it swells slightly here. It doesn't have the conventional hourglass shape. Along the spine, it kind of tapers a little bit more flat. It swells towards the edge of the blade, and I think it preserves the lines of the actual sword when it's in its assembled form, which I don't happen to have here, really, really well. I like the way it looks. Underneath the grip, I've looked here and I can see that this appears to be a full wrap of samegawa, which is nice. We'll see how well the handle holds up. For the moment, it's not cracked and I haven't done much cutting with it. The nodule sizes on the samegawa in some cases appear large. There's no emperor node, so it's not like the finest grade of skin or anything like that, but it is semi-large. It ranges from small to kind of medium-large nodules, and the Minuki stand out a little bit, little gold dragons in there. Casting quality doesn't appear to be that fantastic, but it's not all that bad either. And as an accent, I think the sword looks good. I'll talk about the assembled aesthetics when I get there. But in terms of handle, I will also note that when I took it off, it was not fun to take off. It came off somewhat. It needed a little bit of percussive maintenance to get off, but it did come off. So there's that, and I can reassemble it for to play with and clean, and it's nice that it comes apart. So with that in mind, I will move up to the fuchi area here. And the fuchi does have some minor ledges on it, though in using it as basically as I have, they haven't caused any irritation. It's a minor ledge. The edges seem rounded enough to not cause discomfort, though. So I guess that much is good. Again, the fuchi matches the Hanwei example, as I noted earlier did. But I'm kind of bummed out that in the previous example, the transition seemed a little better than this one. But I do like the shape of this handle more. It seems to have a little better flow with the overall kind of design of the blade, and I like the size as well. And I'm going to tell you about the tsuba. So the tsuba is one of my favorite parts of this sword. It appears to be made out of a folded steel, and I don't really know what to make of the tsuba, honestly. I haven't seen this. I think it's like a custom design, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they did, but I wish they did more of it. It seems very solid. It doesn't feel like it's going to bend. It's made out of a folded steel, which is very subtle, but you can kind of notice it in the right light. And it also has dimensions. So if I hold it kind of this way, it's a little thinner around the edges and swells slightly towards the center. It's a bit small, I think, maybe for katana, but I do happen to really like the design, and I like how it's made. It's simple, pragmatic, and all of that. It's not particularly ornate or anything, but the little subtlety to it, the kind of fact that it tapers and domes a little bit, the fact that it's made out of a folded type of steel, all are appreciated. Now, I'd like it more if it had 3 commas in it rather than 2, but I'll take it. It's thematically something I like. It does have some sharp ledges. They're not kind of maybe chamfered as much as I would like, but my fat fingers have not gotten caught in them yet. So over the course of practicing, I'll let you know how it holds up. It does feel like it could be a problem. It could grab a nail or something, but at the moment it has not. I'll talk a little bit about the habaki. Simple brass habaki. It looks like kind of the cliche simple habaki that you see on everything, except for it's got been taken to a grinder a little bit. But I honestly like the detail on here. It fits really well. It was tensioned in the saya well, and it has some decoration on it. It's kind of emulating a 2-piece habaki, but overall it's a handsome looking habaki. And the fact that it's just a little bit different, has a little bit of separation from all the others out there, the simple brass collared ones, is appreciated. So the saya, this is a ribbed saya in gloss black, and there are some bits to note here. One, the shitodome were loose. I have now super glued them in, but when I got it, they originally just kind of popped out as soon as I undid the presentation knot, and that was not my favorite thing. It tends to bounce around and scratch things up. Also, when I undid the presentation knot, I noticed that the saya, or rather the sageo that came with it, is frayed in some spots, and it just looks used when it's brand new, and that's unfortunate. It's a long sageo, it's functional, and the fraying doesn't really impact my ability to use it, but it is disappointing that it doesn't look pretty. The saya, in terms of shape, I really like the shape. It doesn't rattle when I shake it. Obviously, it's not right now because there's no sword in it, but when the sword is assembled and put in here, it also doesn't shake and is tensioned very well. A little tight, but it's actually loosened up in the time that I've gotten, and with just some of the basic iaido that I've done. It's still tensioned very good, still a little bit tight, but I have a feeling that after a few rounds of iaido, it'll be in a position where it draws and sheathes and is tensioned better. I do find that if I'm not kind of aligned right, that the blade will snag inside the saya. It's easy to it's not on rails exactly as it should be. There's a little bit more space in there than it should be, so it can bind easy with the sharp edge. Something in here is getting cut into, and that is causing, just basically I have to do iaido properly. I have to be straight, otherwise the sword binds in the scabbard. Other little notable imperfections in the scabbard, it looks like there were some spots on here where there was a blemish or a chip or something, and then it got painted or glossed over, and it's just embedded in the lacquer work. And it's not really terribly noticeable, but I can kind of see it. I can also see some blistering between the ribs of the scabbard here. All of these are really anal retentive nitpicky things, maybe with the exception of the frayed ito or the frayed tsugayo and the mitsudomome being loose. With the exception of that, it's all very minor stuff. The fact that it was tensioned right and that it doesn't rattle at all, very, very pleasant things. The koiguchi and kojiri area here appear to be made of horn. Really tough to see the seam on them, but I believe it's there, and from what I can tell, it appears to be made out of some type of horn. And it overall looks well, and I've banged on it a few times and it hasn't chipped, so all of that is nice. I'm going to talk about the blade. First, I would note that the Nakago is nice. I wouldn't say it's anything spectacular, but it is got some attention to detail, some file marking, some signature on it. It has a little bit of taper where it's thicker here and thins out, and so the Nakago is nice. Oddly, the Hamanchi and Munmachi are not in alignment, and they were on the less expensive sword, so that seems an odd choice to have it right on the $135 sword, but off on the more expensive piece. Just a nitpicky thing. Other small notes about imperfections on the blade. It came with some minor rust spots, just a couple small little specks. I bet they could be wiped off with an application of Mother's Mag, but I haven't, so you can see them. The very, very tip of the blade, like the top 1 millimeter, is canted off slightly. It didn't break off, but it came just kind of canted off to the side ever so slightly. And I can notice some blemishes from what appeared to be how the blade was etched. So there seems to be some uneven spotting on how the etchant was cleaned off. I'm presuming that this was, dipped into ferro chloride or some sort of acid to bring out the pattern that you're seeing and then cleaned off. But I guess I don't know that for sure. I can just see that there's some blotchiness in the patterns on the sword. With regard to the Kisaki, there's more than just kind of a sideways sanding happening here. I don't know if it's exactly burnished, but it has a pleasant appearance to it. The Yokote appears to be in the same spot on either side. The bohi termination right here is well done. Again, I don't know if they're symmetrical here. I haven't exactly checked, but they're nice, and it goes all the way up to the tip and terminates in what appears to be the same spot. So I like the overall execution on the Kisaki. Obviously, it's got a little bit of a bent tip. The tip is also not kind of swollen up here near the Kisaki. It might be nice if it were reinforced. That said, the bohi, or however it is, the blade makes a nice swishy sound as I move it around. The bohi, or however it is, it's pretty easy to get it to make noise. Other notes on the blade, it's very, very sharp, very straight, has a nice edge profile. It has a really bold hata, and there's some notes here in that the folding of the steel, it doesn't have open welds, but it has spots that maybe not tightly welded. I don't know the right terminology for it here, but there's little specks where the folding is grabbing, and it basically doesn't look as even and symmetrical as you commonly see on a number of mass production Chinese swords. This looks a little bit more handmade than many of the other swords that I've had that were folded. So I appreciate that. It has a lot of character. It does appear to be laminated. I was told it's a laminated blade. I will break it. I will test it. I will see. I know that's a dubious point. RyanSword in the past has sold laminated blades, or at least from what I've read, there has been cases where people have bought laminated blades and didn't receive them. I will test this, though I am a YouTube reviewer guy, and assumably they know I break the swords and do that. So how much extra confidence that gives you is I suppose up to you. But it does appear to be laminated, at least from what I can tell, and I will guess double check that later. But the pattern is very nice. The hata is really nice. The folding gives me the impression that somebody kind of banged on this with a hammer, maybe more than other steels that I've seen. It has more irregularity to it, I suppose is an appropriate term. It doesn't, the hamon pattern on it is pretty simple, but I like the polish. It's kind of bold and zazzy in a way that's fun. It maybe isn't historical or analogous to some other Japanese sword examples, but I happen to like it. I think it has quite a bit of character. It's very sharp and very nice. It also, in terms of other blade profile bits, it has a very nice curvature. I like how that curvature lines up into the handle and runs through the base. Very often it kind of juts off weird after the habaki. That doesn't seem to be as much the case in this sword. Along with that, it has some distal taper to it. It starts off thick and ends up thinner, so that's nice. The planes are pretty even. There's rippling inside the bohi, but apart from that, the planes of the sword look very well done. Now that's kind of the general outline of the features of the sword. In terms of moving it around, it's actually very fun to move around. I've noted some of the kind of problems with the sword, none of them really manifest as inconveniences when practicing. And obviously I've only done a little bit of practicing with it, but in drawing it, it's an easy, fun tool to move around. It's a little small for me, so I can kind of cheat. I don't have to do some of the things that I'm supposed to be doing in Japanese swordsmanship to get it out and kind of get the swishy sound. It's a very easy tool to work with. It doesn't feel particularly heavy. Honestly, I haven't taken the actual measurements of the sword yet, so I have no idea how much it weighs, but it does feel like a reasonably light sword in the hand, and I feel like I can move it around. Not as light as the Ito, not something I'd want to use if I was at a seminar for, an entire day, but as a general practice tool to use for an hour or two, it feels comfortable to do that. It's really easy to get a swishy sound, so to that end, it's a nice training tool for alignment. I don't have to really muscle it out there to get an audible sense of feedback from if my edge alignment is good or bad. Other notes, it seems very sharp. I did a small bit of cutting with it, and it cut the pool noodle exceptionally well. It seemed like I was getting reasonably good angles. I don't know if they were perfect 45-degree angles, but that's what I was shooting for. I'm not making very efficient use, so my aim is not so great, and I won't blame the ice or that it's cold outside. I'm just not hitting where I'm aiming for exactly, but the angle seems to be pretty good. It was cutting through the pool noodles, and to note those can be somewhat deceptive targets to cut. You require a pretty sharp edge and some reasonable sense of edge alignment in order to get them, otherwise they just kind of flop back and forth. So the fact that it cut pretty well suggests that at least the sword is pretty sharp, and the fact that I made it through, I guess my form might be improving marginally. Anyway, that's kind of my experience in cutting so far. That's all I've done. And my initial impressions so far are pretty positive, honestly. For $350 without shipping, so assuming 400 something is what you're going to be out the door with this sword. One, in terms of like features, fit and finish, I really do like it. I'm a little swayed by the mitsudomome fittings. I happen to really like the theme, but folded steel, laminated fittings that you can pick, rib, saya, nice fit and finish, nice, reasonably okay transitions. I would say it's up there in the realm of swords that I like. Now, I think honestly, Hanwei is nipped and tucked quite a bit better than this one, especially with some of the small details. And I like the sword that Scott sent me, which was also around $400. But that sword, admittedly, had a lot less features. It wasn't a folded sword. It didn't have a theme that I got to pick. The saya was less embellished, but it had little things were better. The fit and finish, how the Ito lined up, how it drew, all of that kind of stuff was maybe a little better, and even the shaping seemed a little bit better on the Hanwei piece. Skydro, I think, is another one that is maybe a little bit better in terms of fit and finish. I would say that's probably my opinion. And Jayco, not that they're better in fit and finish, but if I think of the Jayco sword that I've had, there was a Sanmai blade with a whole bunch of other fixins and oddities to it that was a little less expensive than this, so a little more feature rich, but I think this one actually did a better job of fit and finish than the example that I had from the Jayco blade. But I think the Jayco gave more fitting, more fit and features, and had kind of a similar build quality, but this one I would say is better. Anyway, that's kind of where it stands generally speaking. Do I think so far it's worth $400? Yeah, it's actually a really nice and compelling and fun sword. I'm looking forward to doing more with it. I'm not looking forward to breaking it exactly, but I am looking forward to doing more with it. It seems like a very, very nice sword for the money. I think if you really care about the nipped and tucked and fit and finish aspect of things, the other two companies I mentioned, I don't know that I go with Skydro exactly right now. It sounds like some people are having some issues getting blades from them that they custom order, but if it's in stock somewhere that you trust, then I wouldn't bat an eyelash at it. Hanwei seems to be sending swords out, but anyway, the point is that if you care about the fit and finish side, I think you can spend the amount of money, get less features, but get things that are nipped and tucked a little bit better. Does that translate to a more durable, better, faster, stronger sword? No, not necessarily, but if you care about some of the minutia that I tend to get into on this channel, then I think either of those two companies have done a better job at $400 for a sword, but it doesn't necessarily come with folded or themes that you can pick. In terms of less expensive with similar features, the Jayco had more features, more customization. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it was less expensive than this. It was like $320 for a folded laminated blade, which I verified was laminated, but I don't think the fit and finish was quite at the same level. Similar, but not quite as good. Anyway, does that mean that this is a bad sword? No, it means it's a really nice sword, and it's got some good competition, and I'm looking forward to testing it more, but those are some of my general thoughts on similar blades with kind of similar features as I ramble about what I like and don't like. All right, so that's the meat and potatoes of what I have for you in this video. It is, I covered all the little nitty-picky problems that I see in fit and finish, and I covered the build quality, and I covered some basic usage. And do I think it's worth it at this point? I mean, yeah, it's among other swords that I've thought have been worth it, but I'll reserve my final thoughts and, you know, my final endorsement, if you will, for what it's worth for when I break it and get to spend more time with it. At the moment, it seems like a compelling offering, but I suppose time will tell. I will link the video number 2 when it becomes available. It's going to be a couple months before I get to it, if not more, so no time commitment, but I'll get to it. And if you have any interest in seeing specific tests or something in particular in that video, please let me know in the comments down below. If there's a test that you would like me to do or something like that, I will try to do it so long as it is reasonable. Anyway, that's all I've got for this video. I hope it's been interesting. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.